Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm just going to do a quick sound check to start with. So if you can hear me, please can you type yes in your chat box. Just lets us know that we're live, and you can hear us loud and clear. Hope everybody's doing well today. Can everybody hear us? Judges, you can hear me okay? Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely fine, Chantal, thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to wait a couple more seconds because I haven't had any replies just to see, can everybody hear us okay? If you can hear us, if you could type yes in your chat box, that would be great. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you. So just to introduce myself, my name is Chantal Newton, and I'm the marketing manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum, and I'm also the editor of our online e-magazine Contact Centre Monthly. So just a few housekeeping points to go through before we begin. If you do have any questions for our panel today, please post them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar panel, and these will be put through to the panel throughout the presentation. There are polls for you to participate in today. So when prompted, a poll will appear on your screen, and it will be a selection of 3 answers to choose from. You can only choose one of those answers. And once the answers have been submitted, I'll close the poll and we'll have a look at the results and the panel can discuss those. The webinar session is expected to last about an hour today, so if you're unable to stay for the whole session, don't worry. We are recording the webinar and the link will be sent out to everybody within 24 hours of the webinar ending, but we also post all of our webinars onto our website and our YouTube channel, links of which you can find on our website. So to get today's session started, I'm going to hand you over to Mark Haynes, who is the Director for Customer Experience and Cultural Services at Oxfordshire County Council. Thank you, Mark.
Many thanks to you too, Chantal, for the introductions and the housekeeping there, and welcome everybody. Welcome and good afternoon to the inaugural UKCCF Public Sector Forum, one of the first of many, hopefully. And when I was asked by Trevor last year to chair these, because it was a gap in the CCF calendar, I guess, I was really pleased to be able to do this. I think sometimes the public sector can be forgotten about a little bit when it comes to customer service and the importance that we bring to that industry that is very popular these days. So we have got a number of people interested in today's session. At the moment, I think we've got about half a dozen on the call and a couple of familiar names there. So hi Amy and hi Lynn, nice to see you virtually, I guess, on this call, and thank you everybody for attending today. As I said, it's the first time that we've run one of these for the public sector. As you can see, I'm supported by 3 panelists here, and I'm going to get them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes. But I guess first of all, just a couple of really key things for this meeting. What we want to try and do for the public sector forum is to make sure that this is a forum that's run by ourselves in the public sector for ourselves. So right at the end, we'll be asking for any topics for future agenda items. So in effect, we'll let yourselves pick what you'd like to hear about, and then Trevor in the background and Chantal and probably myself will go and find people to talk about those particular subjects and items in future meetings. The other bit that's really important, I think, is when you sometimes go to these, you then a couple of days later or a couple of hours later, you can sometimes get a phone call from some of our well-known suppliers within the industry. Trevor was very keen for me to actually say that there are no solutions providers invited to these meetings. It is, as I said, a webinar for ourselves led by industry people as opposed to led by our suppliers, our solution providers. So you shouldn't get any phone calls from anybody saying, could we interest you in buying a CRM or a new IVR system today? Because that isn't the purpose of these forums. The purpose of them is really just to have a good, engaging conversation, and obviously we're in the really good business of having meaningful conversations, aren't we? So meaningful conversations about topics of interest, hopefully, and something that you can all then take some golden nuggets away from and have a bit of an understanding about some of the best practice within the industry and people's names, so we can now all start to network in terms of sharing ideas and best practice. So that's a little bit about what we're hoping this forum to be. As I said, this is the first one. We've got a date for the next one, which I'll give to everybody at the end. But let's make this a really useful forum for everybody in the public sector to actually attend and to share the knowledge that we actually can get out of this hour session. A little bit of an echo there. Hopefully that was. I'll just turn my microphone off and hoping that might be a little bit better. It is. Excellent. So let's do some introductions then. So Chantel very kindly said what my role is. So Director of Customer Experience and Cultural Services over at Oxfordshire County Council. Been here about 2.5 years. I have been in local government since about 2005, spent quite a bit of time in Lincolnshire. That's where I know a couple of the colleagues that's on the call, and then moved up to sunny Aberdeen for a couple of years, and then bounced down to Cherwell and to Oxfordshire 2.5 years ago, just before the start of COVID lockdown. 2 days before we went into lockdown, starting a brand new job. Fun, I must say, let's put it that way. So that's a little bit about myself. So let me hand over. I'm just going to go top left in my screen, which is Sue. So Sue, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Hello there. So my name is Sue Marshall. I am the Head of Access Islington for Islington Borough Council. Prior to that, I was with Haringey as their ops manager. And similarly to Mark, I joined them just pre-lockdown. So that was a baptism of fire, first job in public sector, and we all went to work from home. Fortunately, my role for the prior 3 years was promoting remote working and helping businesses to work from home and focus less on presenteeism and more on productivity. So that came in handy. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mark.
Thank you, Phil. Over to you, Phil, top right of my screen. And I was the first one, obviously, to try and talk whilst on mute. So apologies for that, everybody.
We all do it. We all do it. So hi, everyone. My name is Phil Quickenden. I'm the Head of Customer and Registration Services for the London Borough of Camden. I've been here since April, so I'm a new boy. So I changed jobs after COVID, not before. My background prior to that, I worked in adult social care in a contact centre, overseeing sort of front door operations for a county council. So was on the sharp end during COVID, and probably uniquely, from what I gather, kept a contact centre that was in the building and working throughout COVID. So didn't have the break. And prior to that, my background is in police communications. So I ran 909 contact centres for Thames Valley Police and Suffolk Police.
Excellent, Phil. Thank you very, very much for that. And bottom right of my screen is Sandra. Over to you, please, Sandra.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra Pinho. I've joined the council less than 6 months ago, so I suppose I'm the baby of the team right now. New to local government environment as well, worked in the private industry, and I'm the workforce planning and efficiency manager for the contact centre in the council. So looking forward to talk to you a little bit about workforce management today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, colleagues, for those introductions. Much appreciated. So if it's okay with everybody, we will get running in terms of the agenda. And on today, we've got discussions around how to harness data from your contact centre. We've got conversations around employee wellbeing and absenteeism and how to reduce average handle time. And we're going to start with a presentation by Sandra, which is going to talk about workforce management solutions. So I will just add a little bit more until Sandra gives me the thumbs up to say that she's ready to share her screen. And then I'm going to hand over to Sandra for the next 10-15 minutes. And please, as Chantel said earlier on, if anybody's got any questions, then please post them. And we can either answer them during the session or at the end of Sandra's slot, and we'll take it from there. So over to you, if you are okay there, Sandra, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. I hope you are now able to see my screen. Perfect, thank you. So having introduced myself, I'm just going to talk to you about the work that I've started doing in the council. There we go. So just to cover very quickly the agenda for my presentation, just going to talk about the features and the benefits for workforce management tool, how I implemented it in the council, the impact so far, have a quick conversation about the key metrics, and then what else to come. So first and foremost,
Sandra, your slides haven't moved on yet, Sandra. So just to let you know that you're still sharing your first screen, slide.
Bear with me then.
Okay.
Do apologise.
That's all right.
Does that show the right screen now?
It says, "What's in it for me?"
Perfect. That's the one that I want. Thank you. Sorry about that. So really, just to cover the features and the benefits of this tool, I just thought, everyone will be looking at what's in it for me, really. So it's about selling it. For team leaders is about, how does that support their day-to-day job in terms of performance management? So what this tool would give them, it would give them an intraday view in terms of how the day is planning out to the forecast, allows them a live view of adherence as well. So is our staff adhering to the schedule, to what they were supposed to be doing, etc. And also as well, in terms of staffing, did we expect to have more staff than what we have? We've had some unforeseen absence, for example. Therefore, we need to try to adjust to close that gap as much as we can to obviously deliver a good customer service. For our staff, the particular application we use, it does have an app which allows flexibility, can just easily download the app on their phones. They can apply for holiday, for example, time off in lieu, etc. In the comfort of their home at the weekend, etc. The system also provides real-time changes to their schedule. So if there is a requirement for us to swap someone from an email activity to a phone activity, the system is updated. And as part of that real-time change, the system will also provide an alert to the advisor so they can see it. What this application does as well, it gives them the opportunity for a module that we call My Report, which in essence, it gives the advisor a real-time capture of their performance for that particular day that is running, or for previous days as well, if they're interested. So they have that that live insight to how they're performing, so they know what their objectives are, and they know whether they are tracking, falling behind, or hopefully actually ahead of the game. So hopefully it serves as a motivator as well for them to keep doing a really good job. For the business and the community, it's really important. So from a business perspective, it's about increasing that efficiency, because if we are efficient and lean, we ultimately serving our community and increasing customer satisfaction, ultimately, which is what we want. In terms of implementation, just a very simple technique. So I went through the do, check, act, and plan, do, check, and act. So planning, first and foremost, I've tried to understand the strategy. Where do we want to be? Engage with lots of key stakeholders as well, to understand the vision for the future. In terms of checking, I've had to do an awful lot of data cleansing as well. Continue to engage with staff, trying to bring them through that journey, and then implementing what I felt was the right approach, which is in this case was a phased approach, because we have quite a few different services and each one is quite unique in itself, and therefore they needed a different approach. And that was very much in terms of the implementation, what happened. It was very important to then follow that up. It wasn't just a case of implementing, off you go, it's been rolled out. It's about going back and checking in with those key stakeholders again. What went well, what hasn't quite worked. Let's have a look at making those adjustments and making sure that that specific setup, you know, is working for that specific service that we're promoting and that we've created. And last but not least, you know, is about celebrating the success for everything that has gone well, sustain those improvements, and then look for the future. You know, what's out there for us to look forward to improve and develop further. In terms of impact, I've really decided, you know, in terms of sort of trying to apply this, you know, just really follow our values, our 5 values. So in terms of always learning, is about adapting and being flexible, you know, looking at all the different services that we offer to our public. And as I've said earlier, it's about finding that unique approach to be able to implement them in the workforce system, because they work quite differently. So it was very a learning curve, I suppose, for myself, mostly trying to implement, learning about all the different things that we do, and also for bringing the colleagues through that journey as well. Be kind. Be kind and caring. For me, this one is very heavily around people. So one of the things that I've tried to do was really, may sound a bit cheesy, but is winning hearts and minds. So creating that advocacy with regards to this change and bringing this tool along, and making sure that I'm always transparent with regards to what I'm doing, the objective that is there, and how they can contribute, and kind of bringing it back to what's in it for them too as well. Equality and integrity, always make sure that obviously we're talking about a tool, you know, we're talking about a system, but it's also very important to take into consideration all of those special circumstances, and celebrate, I suppose, in a way, the diversity of our workforce. So building in, you know, special occasions such as, you know, we've got colleagues that are, you know, need to pray at a certain time, so we have to allow certain flexibility within our schedules to allow for situations like that as well. Taking responsibility, very important in terms of making sure that it works, the system works for everyone, at the same time making sure that all the relevant key stakeholders are involved to ensure that everything is through the guidelines and is in line with the council strategy ultimately, and then do it differently. Obviously, working in the continuous improvement team is always about looking at how can we do things differently. So I suppose the question, there are 2 ways of looking at it. You know, we can either evolve or we can revolutionize things. So very much dependent on the will for change, we can do little improvements or we can turn things upside down really in certain areas, and it's a decision that I suppose we have to make every day in terms of what else will come along. In terms of key metrics, obviously working in a contact centre, and within my role specifically, they are very much based around statistics. So the top one will be about answer rates or abandonment rates, whatever way we decide to look at it. Looking as well at the wait times. We don't want our customers to be on hold indefinitely, especially for those lines that are somewhat sensitive and that are, wouldn't say more important, but obviously there's a degree of priority because of the types of calls they are. Our service level agreements, obviously in terms of certain calls have to be answered within certain times, etc. Absence, which is a topic we're going to cover later on as well, which has quite a huge impact in terms of our performance. And then last but not least, occupancy and utilisation, depending on the service level agreements that we decide. And then obviously occupancy and utilisation have a great part into it. Obviously, these will be the key metrics that I look at every day. There would also be contributors to others such as staff engagement, core quality as well, and last but not least, customer satisfaction as well. For us to be able to provide a service to one of our residents, we need to get that call answered first and foremost. And then I suppose last but not least, next steps. So looking to build relationships with the services counterpart heads, because to resource plan, obviously you need to have an understanding of changes to come. You know, are we going to change an application or a system? Are we going to be introducing something new? Because that would heavily impact on our resource. Identify opportunities and current opportunities to gain efficiency. Sometimes, you know, a click of a button can make a huge difference to the contact center operation, actually save us hours a day in terms of some of the processes we have set in place. Set operational priorities and a plan in line with the strategy, and in line, obviously, have our own continuity plan in terms of when we are facing high absences or a sudden increase of calls. What do we prioritize? How do we tackle it? So on and so forth. With all of this, obviously, we need to have a supporting structure, and that would be, you know, in terms of reporting, aimed at for us to be able to acknowledge our performance overall. And with that, then that would support creating this performance culture and a framework where advisors, team leaders, senior leadership, etc., they know exactly what to do, when to do it, what to expect. With that, hopefully as well, an opportunity to review our telephony in terms of opening hours. You know, do we support our community as the community expect us to? Do we need to extend our opening hours? Do we need to reduce them? Do we need to have more numbers or reduce the phone numbers that we have out there? So on and so forth. And last but not least, again, very important, is about bringing people along through this journey. So it's to involve our colleagues, but also residents and customers through inside, for us to be able to deliver that service, you know, and we want to deliver a service that is a service that the residents need and want. And that's it for me. I've covered. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Sandra, thank you very much for that. That's a really good insight in terms of the journey that you've been on for your 6 to 7 months that you've been with the Oxfordshire County Council. So thank you very much for that. I'm just going to have a look at the questions bit. So colleagues, if you've got any questions, then please post them. I think we've got one from Lynn. Let's just have a look. I can't see all of it actually. Just bear with me a minute. Hi, is this tool part of your contact centre platform or a separate tool? So Sandra.
So this is a separate tool that obviously talks to our telephony platform as well. Some companies would offer this tool, I suppose, as a part of a package, and there are several tools out there. I would say from experience, having dealt with a few of them, they pretty much do the same thing. They may just have a different look or feel, so that's very much a preference to the planning manager.
Excellent, thank you for the question there, Lynn. can't see any other questions at the moment. Well, I'll keep looking and checking those. And linking into the next conversation that Sue's going to lead on, you did talk about absenteeism a little bit there, because obviously a workforce management solution can give you that capability of building in absenteeism, sickness levels, and being able to determine different levels of absenteeism and the performance that it's going to give you. So Sandra, thank you for that. And I'm just going to bring in Sue now. So Sue, do you want to talk about that employee wellbeing and the absenteeism and take it from there, if that's possible, please?
Yes. So having worked for 2 London boroughs and spoken to other operational heads and ops managers in yet more London boroughs, absence and absenteeism, including sickness, has been a real issue. I would say at the beginning of COVID, real early days, the short-term sickness fell off a cliff for a number of reasons. I think because if you're feeling a little bit under the weather and can't quite manage the commute and you're working from home, feel unlike your team who worked right through, we saw that reduced the short-term sickness because people would log on and work from home quite happily. I've seen a return to that short-term sickness. Some of that may be because people didn't suffer from coughs and colds and sniffles, etc., while they were locked down because they weren't seeing anybody to catch anything. Can we put the first poll up, please, Chantal? And then I'll just go on to talk about how I've addressed the absenteeism during and post-COVID. So the first question is your absence now higher or lower or the same as pre-COVID?
The poll should have automatically launched for you. If it hasn't, you can find the poll in the polls tab, but it should automatically launch for you. I'm just going to leave it a couple more seconds. There we go. I'll close that off for you, and your results are there.
That's interesting, isn't it? So I found that to be the case in the borough that I'm in now, but not in Haringey. It was actually slightly lower, but higher where I am now in Islington. I did a number of things because the absenteeism did concern me, and particularly absenteeism that was longer term. And what I didn't want to do was come down too heavy on people and do harm to somebody who may be genuinely suffering from stress, from anxiety, from mental ill health. So the first thing that I did was I educated myself because it wasn't something I knew an awful lot about and hadn't needed in the past. So I took a course on mental health, first aid in the workplace, 7-week course free of charge. We all love a free course. And that led me to doing a diploma in counselling, which, not because I want to be a counsellor, but yet in the interest of not doing any harm and really understanding how people function, recognising changes, small changes that might be an indicator of bigger changes that were to come, or somebody that was struggling. And early intervention is something that most local government councils talk about, and it was something that I wanted to be able to implement in the service centre, that early intervention, recognising if somebody was going down that path where they weren't very well, or they were struggling with things. So the next question in the poll, please, if you will. Because what I did see was a change in the kind of sickness. So that this next question is about the higher levels, lower levels, or the same levels of long-term sickness. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I feel that tied into mental health awareness, and some of the things that I did in the borough to raise awareness of that, to counter it, and to make it more acceptable, if you like, to talk about those things.
Just going to close the poll off for you now. And here are your results.
Thank you.
Can you
So
see those results, Sue?
yeah, I can. So
Sorry.
the lower at 50% here and higher at 25 and stayed the same at 25. So one of the things that I implemented, that the feedback was excellent actually, and it was raising awareness of mental health and mental wellness, so not just ill health, with customer services and with front-facing staff. So we started off just by raising our heads above the parapet and saying, let's talk about mental health, and discuss why some people were comfortable talking about it and why others weren't. There was a bit of a split actually, between the ladies in the team and the gentlemen in the team, whereas the gentlemen felt very uncomfortable talking about anything like that, whereas the ladies were more likely to open up maybe to a colleague or even to their manager. So we introduced a mental health and wellbeing series, if you like, talking about what triggers anxiety, how to recognise it in ourselves and in others. And we gave everybody a little journal, a lovely little journal, where they could track how they were feeling on a day-to-day basis, scoring themselves out of 10. Really useful because, and for me particularly, if I felt that I was going from a 9 to an 8 to a 7 and below, what was happening, why were things changing, and what did I need to do to put that right? And that could be anything from working less, because when we work from home we tend to work more, through to just having more human contact with people outside of work, again, which was difficult during COVID, but is much better now. So the next poll, please, if we could put that one up. And this is about the short-term sickness and absence, and whether that's higher, lower, or has stayed the same.
Just closing off for you now. And here's your results.
That's really interesting, isn't it? That nobody says that it stayed the same. It's either higher or lower. It'd be interesting to see if the organisations whose sickness is higher at short term is also higher at long term. One of the things that I have found out in both boroughs is that the individuals that we had that had worrying levels of sickness pre-COVID had worrying levels of sickness during and post. So somebody that was never sick before tended to be not sick during and still isn't sick. And I found that quite interesting. But what I did want to do is ensure that we were able to still follow process for long-term absence, short-term absence, but also recognising that there would be cases where we had to be that little bit cautious, and to Sandra's point earlier, to be a little bit kind, to make sure that we were being kind. And I started that by introducing a couple of questions that everybody had to ask themselves at the beginning and at the end of each day. So the reminder at the beginning of the day was earn your money and be kind. And the question at the end of the day was, did I earn my money and was I kind? And it became a real mantra within the contact centre. Kindness first, kindness first, kindness first, but earn your money. Make sure that you are contributing. And kindness included things like reminders that if you are absent and you're genuinely sick, we will give you as much support as we possibly can, in terms of the support that the council provides, but also as a department. But to bear in mind that anybody that is absent is putting extra stress and pressures onto other colleagues. And so if you're ill, you're ill. If you are unsure as to whether you're ill or not and you can work, then please be kind, and be kind to the rest of the department, and make sure that you're pulling your weight and earning your money. Just on the back of that, I also broke it down even further. As a council taxpayer, I broke it down into how many households had to pay council tax in a month for you to get your salary at the end of the month. And I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call, and we did see a reduction in sickness and absence as a result of a reminder every day about how many people have paid their council tax to pay your salary.
Very unique, unique way of sharing information there, based upon that one, I would imagine, Sue.
Yeah, it was. And what's interesting is whether staff, the majority of the staff were permanent, and some were agency, but with on costs, actually the cost was exactly the same, and it was about 20 households. If you include those that, on average, how much they pay on average, 20 households a month to pay an agent's salary. So would you be happy with those 20 households sitting in front of you saying, what have you done with my 150 quid? And if the answer is no, you wouldn't be happy, then maybe you need to have a little bit of introspection and think about the way that you work. So I don't know whether anybody's got any questions about absence, or if anybody would like to give me any insight into how they've managed and what their experience would be. That would be great. I'd love to hear.
I can't see any questions coming through at the moment, actually, Sue. And
I can talk a little bit about what we've done, Sue, if that's
perfect. That would be great.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah. So so we've been on a fairly similar journey to you, I think, in terms of we had some issues pre-COVID with levels of sickness. We had issues during COVID, and we've had issues post-COVID, and we've been exploring different ways of kind of addressing that. We ran a big staff survey for the contact centre in June of this year, not long after I joined, and we've really spent a lot of time understanding what that meant. So as with all surveys, we asked a lot of questions. We then realised that we didn't quite understand the answers, so we actually went back. We did some workshops with staff to really nail down, you know, what are your worries around well-being, and we came up with quite a broad action plan on the back of that to really target those. So you mentioned mental health first aid at work. We've got 10 members of staff currently going through that training, so there'll always be somebody around who can be that listening ear and can give you that immediate support. We've got some workshops, a series of workshops running at the moment about physical, emotional, and kind of mental well-being. So there's, you know, tips on healthy eating, all that kind of stuff being shared with our teams to really kind of give them the very best starting point, and kind of trying to recognise that corporately we're really great at pushing out all these initiatives, but when you're spending your whole day going hello, 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 it's really difficult to engage with some of that stuff. So, you know, making some space for our staff to have that time. And what we found throughout that was a lot of the worries people were having around well-being that they were linking to work were much broader. So can I afford to get to work is more of a cost of living challenge than it is a work challenge. I'm worried you're going to make me come into the office 5 days a week, that kind of thing. That, you know, there were some really simple, quick wins in there, just about offering reassurance to people and helping them kind of look at their broader circumstances about what else could they change in their lives to make, you know, their work experience better.
And Lynn has posted in the questions, actually. I'm not sure if it's a question or information actually, but it goes something like this actually. This may be useful. We do, I think it says we do mini mindfulness sessions with the team. Last week we had a podcast and they did yoga before they started. Getting everything straight in your mind so before we started, and before they started work. So there you go, something to get everybody into the way of thinking, in effect, in terms of that mindfulness. So lots of good examples there, particularly like you're demonstrating how much it costs from a council taxpayer's perspective, actually. So I do like that novel idea, actually.
Yeah, it didn't go down well with it. It didn't go down well with everybody, but I just we do have a level of responsibility to the residents, and it starts with providing value for money, especially in these austere times. And one of the things that we also pushed really heavily was the gratitude element of mindfulness.
Yeah.
You know, what am I grateful for today? And particularly during times like now, one of the things that I'm grateful for is that my salary is guaranteed. You know, the company's not going to go bust, I hope. But it's taking that gratitude, and what do you do about that? Well, you provide value for money, and you make sure that the residents are fully supported. particularly
absolutely.
those. And what we've seen, or what I've seen, is that there's been this shift from all this COVID support, and we learned so much from that, and we're actually picking that up, a lot of what we learn, and lifting it and dropping it down into the resident support for financial crisis. So, which leads me on to the kind of the next topic of handling time and reductions in handling time. And the purpose of this really was to raise the debate. And I listened to a really interesting presentation from Phil at a previous session, where he talked about the move from transactional to relational. And that's exactly what we're doing. We were doing it in my last borough, we're doing it in this borough. And so the question is, how do you manage that average handle time? Because on the one hand, you want your officers to develop a more acute emotional intelligence, and to recognise during a conversation if something's not quite right, and offer that a more holistic support. So if somebody asks, for example, for a copy of their council tax bill, why do you need that? And conversations around, well, you know, I need to provide evidence that I am who I say I am, and I need a bill in the last 3 months. Your council tax bill won't do that. It's produced in April and it's dated April. So tell me a little bit more about what it is that you're looking for. And during conversations that are more open, we'd found and have found that actually it's because they're suffering from financial crisis and they're needing to evidence to be able to get breathing space, for example, and they need copies of their council tax bill, their bank statement, etc. But is there something else that the council can offer? And if you're having those kinds of conversations, you can't say we've got to do that in 6 minutes. But if you remove and say all bets are off, just do what you need to do on the phones, then your to Sandra's point, your abandon rate will suffer, and your handle rate or answer rate will suffer. So what I'm trialing at the moment in this borough is that we have removed a lot of the control, so 50, 60, 70, whatever service you're on calls a day, and we're focusing on talk time and quality. So it's a bit more work for the managers, because they have to listen to more of those calls. It's having a bit more of an eagle eye on the call recording and the call monitoring, so that we can see short calls, medium calls, long calls. And it's a focus with the officers on actually the content of those conversations, but the number of minutes that they're active. So although that's something that was part of the service level agreement and part of their targets previously, it's now more of a focus. So it's about the quality of the conversation and the amount of minutes that they're talking in each hour that they're logged in. So
yeah, and a slightly different way of looking at things, so isn't it? Which I think as this industry continues to evolve, you know, many years ago people said that phones would be non-existent by now, and I think we all know that that was never going to be true anyway. But never mind, let people have the moment of glory on that one. And the quality bit becomes really important, doesn't it? You know, making sure that we deliver that first contact resolution, making sure that we don't get customers repeating the phone calls or complaining, which is always going to drive additional costs into the business, isn't it? So the focus on quality in not having to do it in 3 minutes 32 seconds, for example, is even more paramount, isn't it, to be quite honest? So
it is. So we still have to have an eye on the average handle time. We still have to monitor those medium and long calls as team leaders, but we also need to recognise that as we push more people online, because those who can should, absolutely,
totally right.
it frees up more time for those more vulnerable residents, but we still have to recognise that we're value for money, providing the council taxpayers with their 20 households a month for each one of the officers. We still need to have a focus on, are we giving value for money? So, and I think my belief is that we will measure more on what is the talk time, what is the quality of those calls, and more tools are coming out, in fact, that I've been reviewing, that enable you to help to monitor and to manage that, not just through CSAT surveys, but also through tools which monitor the tone and the language and provide alerts to the people that are managing those officers, you know, John's using this word repeatedly. Should he be using that word? Is it the language that we want to use when we're speaking to our residents? Fred's getting really irate on his calls quite a lot. Do we need to talk to Fred about the quality of his calls? Does he need more support? And that's a really interesting topic, actually, because when we're looking at this, the amount of call minutes, the amount of talk time that they've got per hour, and I don't know what everybody else has found, but if somebody isn't achieving and they need more support, I want to pull them into the office. I want to buddy them up with somebody, and I want somebody to give them that additional support. And I'd love to know how everybody else is handling this, because it's seen as a punishment rather than a support tool. You've got to come into the office now because we think you need more support. You really seem to be struggling. Yeah. You've not quite got your knowledge correct. It's not working over Teams. Like, come back in. Let's have a couple of weeks where we just do some side by side and, you know, really help you to get to grips with this new way of working. And it's seen as a punishment. I don't know how if other people have found that, but
let's get people to post on questions on that. I'm going to move on, Sue, if that's okay. But that is fantastic, and there's some thought-provoking stuff in there. So thank you for that. I'll keep my eye on the questions to see if anybody's coming through with any of those. So Phil, can I bring you in here? You wanted to, a little bit related actually to that, didn't it? Harnessing data within the contact centre. So I'll let you have, if we can try and wrap up for about 25 past, if that's okay, and then we'll just get a chance to ask a couple of final questions of the group, if that's all right. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Mark. So yes, the subjects are definitely linked actually, and how we use data around performance to influence the rest of the organisation is something that's really kind of on the tip of our tongues in Camden at the moment. And we're running a programme called Our Voice of the Customer, which is essentially about looking at all the intelligence we can gather at the front door to help redesign services around what customers are actually telling us. So I'm sure anybody in local government can probably list off 15 times they've spoken to a service about what the customers are saying, and you get that kind of cold shoulder about, no, we know our customers, we know what they want, leave us alone, which is all based on supposition. So what we're trying to do here in Camden at the moment is to reframe the role of the contact centre in supplying that information to the rest of the organisation. So the way I would describe it as is kind of historically, the contact centre was seen as a department out of 30 different services that the council operate, and therefore we would be one of 30 conversations IT might have about a project, or that finance might have about a project, or social care might have about a project. And actually we're trying to reframe that to say, actually you should only have 29 conversations, but have the contact centre in all of those, because we've got all this information, this rich data that can support you in terms of really knowing what your customer wants. And Sue mentioned we were kind of looking at this balance between transactional and relational, and that really comes on the back of what are we hearing, what's that soft intelligence and that data showing us that our customers need right now, and how do we amplify that so the organisation really hears it. So the way we're doing that is by kind of producing a series of reports which focus on pulling information from different parts of the organisation, so not just the contact centre element of the journey, but different parts of the organisation, complaints handling, web usage data, and pulling that together into a kind of single report for a service to use that as the conduit for a conversation. And what we found is that's been a really powerful way to start these conversations off on the right foot, because you're presenting information fresh from the customer in a way which is difficult to argue with. So actually it causes that pause for reflection in the service, to say, oh, okay, so what is happening there? And we've found that's really opened some doors for us. So a really good example was, we were talking to some colleagues in housing last week. We got some really clear, obvious data that says, we've rung you, Camden, to ask a question about how I can find information on private renting, and there's nothing on your website, so I've had to ring you up. So we've taken that back to the service, and straight away we've got this. Well, we've got a brand new website. It's brilliant. We've spent a lot of time and effort and money developing this website. So your insight must be wrong. And then actually, when we drill down into it, we realise we have got this new website, but it's not prominently displayed. It's not advertised. It's kind of link 13 out of 15 on your page. So you're not seeing the traffic that you should be seeing on that website. So we've been able to work with them to develop the content to make sure that customers can easily find that information that they're looking for. That's been an investment on our part, and I think this is where we do things quite differently at Camden. Is we've recognised that spending a little bit of extra time, and when we're thinking about average handle time and things like that, that's a big investment. But spending that a little bit longer on each of those calls to really understand why somebody rang us, what were they trying to achieve, what have been the gaps in the service provision or the information provision that have led to them ringing us, and then using that information to spark these conversations across the organisation. So, for example, we track first contact resolution through asking a few additional questions at the end. Was it the first time you've rung us about this issue today? If not, why did you need to ring us again? So we collect qualitative and quantitative data around that. And then I'm using those as the kind of backbone to conversations with the rest of the organisation about, so how do we shift that? How do we, you know, is this first contact resolution a good thing or a bad thing in the service, first of all, because it's not always. But if it is a good thing, how can we get more of it? How can we influence the way you're delivering services? And going back again to what Sue was saying, we know we have tons of information about what our staff do in a contact centre. So I would say it's probably the only place in any organisation where I can tell what time Dave goes to the toilet on a Thursday morning, because I can look at his patterns, I can see it in the wrap times or in the codes he's using. So we've got all that really kind of accessible information about the first 10 minutes of a customer's journey, and then the next 2 years they're in the system going through a social care assessment or a planning application. We actually don't track that customer's journey. We know very little about it by comparison, and what we don't do is pull all of that data together so we can see Dave's journey. We see the customer's journey after they've spoken to Dave right through to their planning application being authorised 2 years down the line. And then the next stage for that for us is about saying, right, well, that customer then, that's one of their customer journeys, but they're engaging with all these different services in the council at different times. And so it's all very well as understanding that one journey in isolation really, really well, but I want to understand everything that we're doing, everything that's going on around this one individual, to see where the overlaps are. If they're ringing us about their rent payment, they're not able to make their rent payment. Okay, are we tracking that across to know that they're not going to make their council tax payment? Are they in a position where they can feed their kids? You know, are they getting the benefits they're entitled to? And starting to join all those conversations up. So actually, when you ring us, A, we're asking the right questions to inform the rest of your journey, but B, we're having a really good quality conversation with you, taking that extra time that Sue's talking about to really understand your needs, hoping then that you won't need to contact us 4 or 5 times to chase stuff up.
Yeah, that's really good, isn't it? It's just joining the dots together. And I think the bit at the end that you just said there, Phil, was to make sure that they don't have to ring us again. Because if you can take, an extra 4 or 5 minutes dealing with that call, it's way better than having another 3 or 4 calls, all of 3 or 4 minutes in each of those individual areas. So it actually makes sense, doesn't it, to focus on the quality bit and the total resolution of a contact and a case, as opposed to just the here and now, to be quite honest. So that's excellent, Phil. Thank you. And you call it the voice of the customer. So
That's
the epitome of. Yeah. Let's see if we've got any questions, because I don't think we have. No. Excellent. So we're 26 minutes past. So literally we've got 4 minutes left. So I'm just going to wrap it up now, if that's okay with everybody. So first of all, can I shout out to Chantel, probably still in the background, but thank you for helping us organise this today. Much appreciated, and Trevor as well. Thank you to my 3 panellists as well. So Sandra, thank you very much. Sue, thank you. Phil, thank you. I hope to see you all again. I'll obviously see Sandra again because she works for me basically in the team. And Sue, Phil, it's been actually great to meet you two today as well. And let's hope our paths cross in the not too distant future as well. You never know, we might be able to do something like this in a place as opposed to doing it online. You never know, we might be able to do that. And colleagues that have joined us, attendees, I think we're down to 5 now. I think we were up to 8. But can you just, if you've got anything that you'd like to post in either the messages or the chat, really interested in what we call WWW, so what you thought went well, what went well, and EFI, which is EBI, sorry, should I say? If you've got my own acronyms then, which is even better if. So if you've got any suggestions about how we could make this session even more fun and interactive, please jot them down, or please send emails to Trevor or to Chantel or to myself. And I'm really keen just to understand, I know there's only five of you on the call, what topics would you like to hear about in the future? So we put these together because we thought they were relevant, they were topical. We talk about these a lot in terms of data, looking after people's health and mental well-being, systems that help us drive through everything. Data is always top of the agenda, isn't it, when we're talking about it? But what would hit the mark with yourself? What do you want to know about? Do you want to have a long session on CRM, say, for example, or something like that? Do you want to pick up on any particular service areas where you're having problems with? Anything on complaints or how to deal with FOIs in a really meaningful conversation? So please, if you don't mind giving us some feedback on today, that would be really, really appreciated. And I think if I can just say, perhaps on behalf of the UKCCF, thank you everybody for turning up today. Really nice to see a number of colleagues on the call today on the webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please give us some feedback, and we hope to see you again in the future. And just a date for your diary, says that you haven't to look now. The next one that we've got, it'll come on the website anyway, is the 11th of January 2023. So that's the next session for the Public Sector Forum. Same time, same place. And I hope to see you all then. So thank you everybody, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye
Thanks,
now.
everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, Mark. Bye bye.